The coffee cup shattered against the marble floor, and in that moment, my entire world came crashing down with it. I stood there in my stained apron, trembling, as Kong Doyen stared at me with eyes colder than ice, eyes that 3 months ago had looked at me like I was his entire universe. Now, surrounded by his men in $1,000 suits, he spoke to me like I was dirt beneath his shoe. Clumsy. Pathetic. How did someone like you even get hired here? His associates erupted in laughter, their voices echoing through the upscale Seoul Café as everyone turned to watch my humiliation. My hand instinctively moved to my stomach, protecting the 12-week-old secret growing inside me, his child, a son he didn't know existed. I wanted to scream it right there, to tell this powerful man that he'd left more than broken promises behind in Atlanta. But I couldn't. Not yet. Because what happened next would bring the most dangerous man in Seoul to his knees, destroy a Mafia wedding, and prove that some secrets refuse to stay buried. What those coffee-stained moments set in motion would change everything. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love knowing how far these stories reach, and I read every single one. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button because you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Trust me, what happens next will leave you speechless. The coffee cup slipped from my trembling fingers and shattered against the marble floor. Hot liquid splashed across my worn sneakers as I stood frozen, my stained apron suddenly feeling like a spotlight. Kong Doyen's cold eyes cut through me like I was invisible, like I was nothing. 3 months ago, those same dark eyes had looked at me with something that felt like tenderness in a small Atlanta cafe. Now, surrounded by his men in expensive suits, he stared at me with pure disgust. Clumsy, he said, his voice sharp enough to slice. How did someone like you even get hired here? His associates laughed, their diamond watches glinting under the chandelier. My hand instinctively moved to my stomach, protecting the secret growing inside me. 12 weeks pregnant with his child, and he was looking at me like I was dirt on his shoe. I wanted to scream the truth, to tell everyone in this Seoul cafe that this powerful man had held me in his arms and whispered promises he never intended to keep. Instead, I knelt down to clean up the mess, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. I remembered everything about the week we met. It was 3 months ago in Atlanta, where I worked at a small family-owned cafe near the university. He walked in wearing casual clothes, smiling like he had all the time in the world. Just Doyen, he'd said when I asked his name. I'm here on business, but I hate corporate restaurants. This place feels real. For 7 days, he came every morning. We talked about everything, my dreams of traveling, his stories about Korea, the way we both loved old movies. On the 5th day, he kissed me in the empty cafe after closing. It felt like magic, like fate. He took my number, promised to call, kissed me goodbye at the airport with such tenderness I believed every word. Then silence. Complete, absolute silence. My calls went to voicemail. My texts turned green, blocked. 2 months later, I saw the positive pregnancy test and my world tilted. I tried everything to reach him, but Doyen had vanished like smoke. Then I found his business card wedged in my jacket pocket. Kang Doyen, CEO, DY Corporation, Seoul. Coming to Korea had taken every cent I'd saved. I'd quit my job, sold my car, and bought a one-way ticket with a plan that seemed clear in Atlanta but terrified me now. I needed to tell him about our baby. Whatever happened after, at least I'd have tried. I'd researched his company, learned he frequented an upscale cafe in Gangnam, and somehow managed to get hired there 2 weeks ago. Every day, I watched the door, rehearsing what I'd say. I never imagined he'd walk in and look straight through me. I never imagined he'd treat me like a stranger, then worse, like something beneath him. My coworkers Sumi had whispered warnings about him all week. That's Kang Doyen. His family controls half the city's underground. He's engaged to Yoon Jae-won. Her family runs the other half. Together, they'll be unstoppable. Don't even look at him too long. But I'd already done more than look. I'd fallen for him, believed him, and now carried the consequence of that trust growing inside me while he humiliated me in front of strangers. After my shift ended, I walked home through Seoul's glittering streets, feeling more alone than ever. My tiny apartment was in a neighborhood far from the cafe's luxury, a single room with a hot plate and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. When I unlocked my door, I found an envelope on the floor, slipped underneath while I was gone. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was cash, more money than I'd make in 3 months, and a note in English. For your silence. Leave Seoul within 48 hours, or there will be consequences. You know who this is from. I sank onto my mattress, the bills scattered around me like accusations. He knew. Doyen knew I'd recognized him. He knew I worked at that cafe. And instead of talking to me, instead of asking why I was here, he was paying me to disappear like I was some kind of threat. The money felt dirty in my hands, but I was practical enough to know I needed it. Pregnant, alone, in a foreign country, I couldn't afford pride. But I also couldn't afford to run. Not yet. I went to work the next day with my head held high. Sumi noticed immediately, pulling me aside during our break. Aisha, you look different. What happened? I wanted to tell her everything, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I said, I knew someone here once. Someone who turned out to be different than I thought. Sumi's eyes went wide. Not someone dangerous, right? Not someone connected. I didn't answer, and she grabbed my hand. Listen to me. In Seoul, there are people you don't cross. Powerful families who make problems disappear. If you're in trouble, you need to leave. Tonight. But I was tired of running, tired of being erased. I'd come here for a reason, and I deserved at least the chance to speak my truth. That afternoon, Doyen came back to the cafe. This time alone. He cornered me in the storage room while I was restocking supplies, his presence filling the small space. I gave you money, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Why are you still here? I faced him in that cramped storage room, my heart pounding so hard I thought he could hear it. I'm not here to cause trouble, I said, forcing my voice steady. I just needed to tell you something important. His jaw tightened. I don't know what you think happened between us, but you need to understand I'm not that person anymore. Whatever you want, the answer is no. Before I could respond, his phone rang. I heard a woman's voice on the other end, sweet and possessive. Doyen, where are you? We have the venue appointment in an hour. His fiancé. He looked at me one last time, something flickering behind his eyes, guilt, maybe, or just annoyance. Stay away from me, he said. This is your last warning. Then he was gone, and I was alone with the secret that was growing heavier every day. I pressed my hand to my stomach, feeling the slight curve that was just beginning to show. I whispered to my baby. I tried to tell him. That night, I decided I'd write him a letter. I'd explain everything, leave it with Sumi to deliver, and then I'd figure out my next move. The next morning, everything got worse. Yoon Jae-won walked into the cafe like she owned it, surrounded by 3 other women who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. She was beautiful in a way that made my chest ache, perfect skin, designer clothes, the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. I was taking their order when she looked at me with cold assessment. You're new, she said, not a question. I hope you're better than the last girl. The service here has been terrible lately. I took their orders perfectly, brought their drinks exactly right, but nothing satisfied her. She sent back her coffee twice, complained about the temperature, the phone, the cup. Then, as I set down her 3rd attempt, she accidentally knocked it over, the hot liquid spilling across the table and onto my apron. Oh, how clumsy of you, she said, her smile razor sharp. Maybe you should be more careful. People like you should really know their place in a city like Seoul." Her friends laughed, and I stood there soaked in coffee, humiliation burning through me. But it was her eyes that told me the truth. She knew. Somehow, she knew I was connected to Doyen. That evening, I felt the cramping start. Sharp, twisting pains that doubled me over in my apartment. I tried to breathe through it, but then I saw the blood. Panic flooded through me as I called the only person I knew, Sumi. She arrived within 20 minutes, finding me on the bathroom floor, terrified and crying. "Hospital now," she said, helping me to her car. The emergency room was bright and cold. A doctor examined me while I prayed desperately, begging any god who would listen to save my baby. After what felt like hours, he came back with results. "The baby is okay," he said gently. "But you're under extreme stress. Your blood pressure is dangerous. You need complete rest, no heavy work, and you need to avoid stressful situations. Another incident like this could result in miscarriage." Sumi held my hand as I cried with relief. The doctor gave me strict orders and a bill that took the last of the money Doyen had sent. As we left, I realized I couldn't keep working at that cafe. I couldn't keep putting myself in his path. For my baby's safety, I needed to disappear. At the hospital, I met Dr. Choi Min-jun, an older physician who'd overheard my conversation with the billing department. He'd seen me counting cash, heard my American accent, noticed I was alone. After my examination, he stopped me in the hallway. "Forgive me for overhearing," he said kindly, "but you seem to be in a difficult situation. I have a friend who runs a guest house outside Seoul. She needs help with light work, cooking, cleaning, nothing strenuous. In exchange, you'd have room and board." I stared at this stranger offering me a lifeline. "Why would you help me?" Dr. Choi's expression grew sad. "I've worked in Seoul for 30 years. I've seen what happens when powerful people want someone to disappear. I've seen too many young women slip through the cracks." He handed me a business card. "Think about it. But my advice? Whatever brought you to Seoul, whatever you're running from, sometimes the smart choice is to hide until you're strong enough to fight." That night, with Sumi's help, I packed my few belongings and disappeared into the quiet suburbs, leaving behind the cafe and Kong Doyen's cold eyes. The guest house was everything Dr. Choi had promised. It sat on a quiet street lined with cherry trees, run by a woman named Mrs. Kang who welcomed me with warm eyes and no questions. She was in her 60s, with silver hair and hands that had clearly worked hard for decades. "Dr. Choi told me you need a safe place," she said simply. "You'll have the small room upstairs. I need help with breakfast cooking and light cleaning. Nothing that will hurt you or the baby." I started crying right there in her doorway. She'd known I was pregnant just by looking at me. Mrs. Kong pulled me into a hug that smelled like jasmine and home. "I've been where you are," she whispered. "Alone, scared, carrying a child whose father didn't want to know. You're safe here now." For the first time in months, I felt my shoulders relax. The guest house had 4 guest rooms, usually filled with older tourists who wanted authentic Korean experiences. My job was simple: help prepare traditional breakfasts, keep the common areas clean, and rest. Over the following weeks, I settled into a rhythm. Mrs. Kong taught me Korean, fed me well, treated me like the daughter she'd never had. 3 months passed like a gentle dream. I was now 5 months pregnant, my belly round and obvious. Mrs. Kang had become my family, and the guest house felt like sanctuary. One evening, as we prepared dinner together, I finally told her everything. About Doyen, about Atlanta, about the humiliation and the money and the terror. She listened without judgment, her hands never stopping their work chopping vegetables. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I was 17 when I fell in love with a man from a powerful family. He promised me everything. When I got pregnant, he gave me money and told me to disappear. I raised my son alone. He's a doctor now, living in Busan. He never met his father. She looked at me with eyes that had seen the same pain. You did the right thing by leaving. But before you go back to America, you should try one more time. Not for him, for your child. So your baby never wonders if you tried. The next day, I wrote Doyen a letter. I explained everything, the pregnancy, my presence in Seoul, my intentions. I asked nothing except that he know the truth. I gave it to Sumi to deliver to his office. What I didn't know was that my letter never reached Doyen. Sumi went to DY Corporation's headquarters, a gleaming tower in Gangnam, and asked for Kong Doyen at the front desk. She was directed to the executive floor, where a man in a black suit intercepted her. I'm Secretary Han, he said smoothly. I handle all matters for Mr. Kong. I'll make sure he gets this. Sumi handed over my letter, relieved and unaware. Secretary Han returned to his office, opened the envelope, and read every word. His face remained expressionless as he learned about the pregnancy, about Atlanta, about my desperate attempt to contact Doyen. Then he picked up his phone and called Yoon Jae-won. Miss Yoon, the situation has been handled. The American woman left Korea. She won't be a problem. He hung up and fed my letter into the shredder, watching the paper turn to confetti. Then he updated his records. Foreign threat neutralized. No further action required. Doyen never knew I'd tried to reach him. He assumed I'd taken his money and disappeared like he'd demanded. The truth was destroyed before it could ever reach him, and I waited at the guest house for a response that would never come. For months later, I was 8 months pregnant and had made peace with my situation. Sumi had told me she delivered the letter personally, and when weeks passed with no response, I understood. Doyen had made his choice. He didn't want to know. I'd given him every opportunity, and now I was done trying. Mrs. Kang helped me prepare for the baby's arrival. We'd set up a small nursery in my room, filled with second-hand items and clothes she'd sewn herself. I'd chosen a name, Ji-hun, a Korean name to honor his heritage even if his father wanted nothing to do with him. My son would know his roots, would know he was wanted and loved, even if only by me. Then the news broke. I was folding laundry in the guest house living room when I saw the television announcement. Kong Doyen and Yoon Jae-won's wedding, the event of the season, uniting two powerful families. The ceremony would take place at the Paradise Grand Hotel, Seoul's most exclusive venue. The screen showed photos of them together, looking like they'd stepped out of a fairy tale. Something twisted in my chest, but it wasn't the sharp pain I'd expected. It was just sadness, soft and resigned. Mrs. Kang noticed me staring at the television. She sat beside me, taking my hand in hers. That's him, isn't it? The father. I nodded, unable to speak. She was quiet for a moment, then said something unexpected. The Paradise Grand Hotel sometimes orders special desserts from us. My traditional rice cakes are famous in certain circles. I received a call this morning. They want 500 pieces for a wedding next month. I understood immediately. His wedding. Yes, Mrs. Kong said carefully. I know this sounds strange, but I think you should help me prepare them. Not to see him, not to cause a scene, but to face this moment, to know you were there in your own way, and then to let it go forever. Sometimes we need closure to truly move forward. I wanted to refuse. Every logical part of my brain screamed that going anywhere near Doyen's wedding was insane. But Mrs. Kang had earned my trust over these months. If she thought this would help me heal, maybe she was right. Okay, I whispered. I'll help you. But I stay in the kitchen. I don't go anywhere near the ceremony. She squeezed my hand. Of course. Just the kitchen. The wedding day arrived too quickly. I woke up feeling strange, my body heavy and uncomfortable in ways that went beyond normal pregnancy aches. Mrs. Kang noticed me wincing as we loaded the rice cakes into her van. Are you sure you're well enough for this? She asked, concern creasing her face. I'm fine, I lied. just tired. We drove to the Paradise Grand Hotel as the sun rose, entering through the service entrance. The kitchen staff barely glanced at us as we set up our station, 2 more invisible workers in the machine that made luxury events run smoothly. Through the doorway, I could hear the preparations, flowers being arranged, chairs being set up, musicians practicing. Doyen was somewhere in this building, getting ready to marry someone else while I stood in the kitchen, 8 months pregnant with his child. Then I felt it. A sudden, sharp pain that made me gasp and grab the counter. Liquid pooled around my feet, and Mrs. Kang's eyes went wide. "Your water just broke," she said, her voice tight with controlled panic. "The baby's coming. Now." "It's too early," I whispered, terrified. "I'm only 8 months." "It's too early." Mrs. Kang moved with surprising speed, calling for help while keeping me steady. Within minutes, a doctor appeared, Dr. Choi Min-jun, the same physician who'd helped me months ago. "I'm a guest at the wedding," he explained quickly. "Doyen's family and mine go back years. But right now, you're my priority." They rushed me to the hotel's medical suite, a fully equipped emergency room kept on site for VIP guests. The pain was overwhelming, coming in waves that left me breathless. Dr. Choi examined me quickly. "The baby's coming fast. You're already 6 centimeters dilated. We need to do this here. There's no time to transfer you to a hospital." I wanted to scream, to cry, to be anywhere but here. But my body had made its own choice. As Dr. Choi prepared, I could hear music starting in the ballroom below. The wedding ceremony was beginning. Doyen was getting married while I was giving birth to his son 3 floors above him. The irony would have been funny if I wasn't so terrified. Mrs. King held my hand, whispering prayers and encouragement as the contractions intensified. "You can do this, Aisha. You're strong. You're so strong." In the ballroom below, Doyen stood at the altar in a custom tuxedo, his face carefully blank. Jaiwon looked beautiful beside him in a dress that cost more than most people's cars. The families watched with satisfaction. This marriage secured power, territory, and profit. Everything was going according to plan. Except Doyen couldn't stop thinking about her. The waitress from months ago with scared eyes and trembling hands. He'd convinced himself she was trying to trap him, to exploit him somehow. He'd paid her off and assumed she'd disappeared. But sometimes late at night, he remembered Atlanta. Remembered the week when he'd been just Doyen, not the heir to a criminal empire. Remembered how she laughed at his jokes and touched his hand like he was someone worth knowing. He'd blocked those memories, told himself they were weakness. But standing at this altar, promising his life to a woman he didn't love, those memories felt like the only real thing he'd ever had. The officiant was speaking. Doyen forced himself to focus, to play his part. He didn't know that at that exact moment, 3 floors above, I was bringing his son into the world. Jihoon was born at exactly 3:47 p.m. as the wedding ceremony concluded downstairs. He came out screaming, healthy and furious, his tiny fists waving at the world. Dr. Choi placed him on my chest, and I felt something shift fundamentally in my universe. This was my son. Mine. He had Doyen's eyes, his nose, but he was completely and perfectly mine. "He's beautiful," Mrs. Kang whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Perfect." But my relief was short-lived. I felt suddenly dizzy, the room tilting. Dr. Choi's expression changed, becoming sharp and urgent. "She's hemorrhaging. I need blood now." He was moving fast, checking vitals, pressing on my abdomen. "Her blood type is AB negative, extremely rare. I need to find a match in this hotel immediately." He pulled out his phone, making calls, checking the hotel's guest registry. Then he stopped, his face going pale. "There's only one AB negative match in the building right now," he said quietly. "Kang Doyen." The words hung in the air like a bomb. Mrs. Kang's hand tightened on mine. "You can't," she whispered. "You can't tell him. Not like this." But Dr. Choi was already moving toward the door. "I can't let her die to protect his ignorance." Dr. Choi burst into the wedding reception, his medical coat out of place among the tuxedos and gowns. He found Doyen at the head table, Jaiwon beside him, both smiling for photographs. "Mr. Kang," Dr. Choi said, loud enough to cut through the music. "I need you. Medical emergency. It's life or death." The room went silent. Doyen stood immediately, his security training kicking in. "What's wrong? Who's hurt?" "AB negative blood type. You're the only match in the building. The patient is hemorrhaging and will die without a transfusion in the next 20 minutes. Doyen didn't hesitate. "Take me now." He followed Dr. Choi out of the ballroom, Jaiwon calling after him in confusion. The security team tried to follow, but Dr. Choi blocked them. "Patient privacy. Family only." They took the elevator in tense silence. Doyen assumed someone from his organization had been hurt, maybe in an attack during the wedding. He wasn't prepared when Dr. Choi led him into the medical suite and he saw me lying on the bed, pale and unconscious. He wasn't prepared for the tiny newborn baby in Mrs. Kang's arms. He stopped breathing. Just stopped. Dr. Choi's voice was cold. "This is Aisha. She came to Seoul to tell you about your son. You never listened." I watched through half-closed eyes as Doyen stood frozen in the doorway. His face had gone completely white, his usual composure shattered. Dr. Choi was already preparing the transfusion equipment, moving with practiced efficiency. "Sit," he ordered, pointing to a chair. "Your blood or her life. Choose now." Doyen sat mechanically, letting Dr. Choi insert the needle without looking away from me. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I swear I didn't know." "She wrote you a letter," Mrs. Kang said, her voice sharp with protective anger. "She tried to tell you. Your people made sure you never got it." The transfusion began, Doyen's blood flowing into my veins. He stared at Ji-hun through the clear bassinet, and I saw the exact moment he recognized himself in our son's features. "He has my eyes," Doyen said, his voice cracking. "I have a son." The door burst open. Jaiwon stood there in her wedding dress, her face twisted with rage and something that looked like fear. "What is this? Who is she? Why were you pulled from our reception?" She saw me, saw the baby, and her expression shifted to pure fury. "This is a setup. She's trying to ruin us. Doyen, come back to the reception right now." Doyen pulled the needle from his arm, the transfusion complete. He stood and faced Jaiwon, and I saw him differently than I ever had before. There was something raw in his eyes, something broken and rebuilding simultaneously. "This is my son," he said quietly. "His name is Ji-hun, and I won't pretend he doesn't exist." Jaiwon's laugh was sharp and brittle. "You can't be serious. You're going to throw away everything, our families, our plans, our future for some waitress who trapped you." "She didn't trap me," Doyen said, and his voice had gone cold in a way that made even Jaiwon step back. "I trapped myself. I lied to her in Atlanta. I used her and threw her away. I paid her to disappear instead of listening. Everything that's happened is because of my choices." Jaiwon grabbed his arm. "Think about what you're saying. Both our families are downstairs. If you acknowledge this child, if you humiliate me like this, there will be war. Is that what you want?" Doyen looked at her, then at Ji-hun, then at me. "I spent my whole life doing what my family wanted, becoming what they needed. Today, I choose differently." Jaiwon slapped him hard across the face. "Then you're a fool." She turned and walked out, her wedding dress trailing like a white flag of surrender. The next hours were chaos. Jaiwon's family demanded explanations. Doyen's family tried to control the narrative. But Doyen stood firm in a way that surprised everyone, including me. He canceled the reception, ended the wedding, and had his lawyers begin dissolving the marriage contract before it could be finalized. Meanwhile, I stabilized with his blood in my veins and our son sleeping peacefully in my arms. Dr. Choi kept me for observation overnight. Doyen stayed outside my room, refusing to leave, sending away family members and lawyers who tried to pull him back into their world. The next morning, I woke to find him sitting by my bedside, looking at Jihun with an expression I couldn't read. "I'm sorry," he said when he saw I was awake. "Those words aren't enough. They'll never be enough. But I need you to know I didn't know about the letter. I didn't know you tried to reach me. My secretary intercepted it to protect the wedding alliance. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. I came to Seoul to tell you I was pregnant. You humiliated me in front of strangers and paid me to disappear. A letter shouldn't have been necessary." He flinched, but didn't look away. "You're right. I was a coward. I saw you and panicked because you represented everything I was supposed to leave behind." Over the next week, everything changed rapidly. Jaiwon's family launched a smear campaign, spreading rumors that I was a gold digger who'd trapped Doyen with a fake pregnancy. Online articles appeared with my photo, calling me every terrible name. Someone found my old address and vandalized Mrs. Kang's guest house with hateful graffiti. I was terrified. These were powerful, dangerous people who saw me as a threat to their empire. But Doyen did something I never expected. He held a press conference, shocking for someone in his position, and stood before cameras to announce, "Jihun is my son. Aisha is under my protection. Anyone who harms them answers directly to me." It was a declaration of war against Jaiwon's family and even factions of his own family who'd wanted the alliance. Within 48 hours, the harassment stopped. The articles disappeared. Security appeared outside Mrs. Kang's guest house. Doyen's message was clear: touch them and die. He came to visit every day, always respectful, always asking permission before entering. He held Jihun with the careful reverence of someone holding something precious and breakable. He brought supplies, hired guards, offered money. I accepted the security and some supplies, but refused the money. "I don't want to be bought," I told him firmly. "If you want to be in Jihun's life, prove you've changed." Doyen proved it in small ways. He showed up every morning, learning how to change diapers and prepare bottles. He sat through Jihun's screaming fits at 2 a.m., walking the floor with our son while I rested. He asked questions about my life, about Atlanta, actually listening to the answers. He apologized to Mrs. Kang for the vandalism and paid to have her guest house completely renovated. He found Sumi and confirmed that Secretary Han had intercepted my letter, then fired him publicly. 3 months passed. Doyen moved us to a secure apartment with his protection, but he didn't push for more. He didn't demand access or try to control me. He simply showed up every day and tried to earn back what he destroyed. Then Jaiwon made her final move. She hired someone to kidnap Jihun, planning to force Doyen back to her by holding our son hostage. The attempt happened outside a medical clinic during Jihun's checkup. But Doyen's guards stopped it instantly. Security footage showed Jaiwon orchestrating everything from her car. Doyen had her arrested. Her own family, seeing the evidence and wanting to avoid legal consequences, disowned her publicly. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison. The families that had opposed us quietly backed down, recognizing that Doyen would burn everything to protect his son. 6 months after Jihun's birth, I finally felt like I could breathe. I lived in a beautiful apartment that Doyen provided, but I'd started an online business selling Mrs. Kang's rice cakes to international customers. I was supporting myself, independent. Doyen visited every single day, had become a genuinely involved father, and had slowly, carefully earned my trust. We weren't together romantically. I wasn't ready for that, might never be. But there was something gentle growing between us, built on different foundations than before. One evening, I watched Doyen sitting on the floor with Jihoon, teaching our 6-month-old son to laugh by making silly faces. Jihoon's giggles filled the apartment, pure and joyful. Doyen looked up and caught me watching. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. I considered lying, but we'd promised each other honesty. "I'm thinking that the man who humiliated me in that cafe would never sit on the floor making ridiculous faces to earn baby laughs. I'm thinking maybe people can change. Maybe." He smiled, sad and hopeful at once. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving it. However long that takes." And watching him with our son, I thought maybe, just maybe, I was willing to let him try. Because the man who had shattered that coffee cup and my dignity in front of strangers had learned the hardest lesson of his life, that real power isn't about control or fear. It's about showing up every single day and proving you've changed. The seasons changed in Seoul, and with them, so did we. Doyen continued his transformation in ways that surprised even me. He stepped back from the darker aspects of his family's business, redirecting resources toward legitimate enterprises. He attended parenting classes, something I never imagined a mafia boss doing, and actually listened to the instructors. He learned to cook simple meals so he could help when he visited. Most importantly, he learned to ask instead of demand, to suggest instead of command. Mrs. Kong became Jihoon's grandmother in every way that mattered. She taught Doyen traditional Korean recipes, the same ones she'd taught me, creating a bridge between our different worlds. Dr. Choi checked on us monthly, watching with quiet satisfaction as the family he'd helped save began to heal. Even Sumi visited occasionally, amazed at how everything had transformed from that terrifying day in the cafe. One afternoon, as spring blossoms fell like snow outside my window, Doyen arrived with something different in his expression. He'd been patient for months, never pushing, never demanding more than I was willing to give. But today, there was a question in his eyes that made my heart race. "Aisha," he said, sitting across from me while Jihoon napped in his crib. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." "I'll accept whatever answer you give." I nodded, my throat suddenly tight. "Do you think there's a chance, not now, maybe not for years, but someday, that you could see me as more than just Jihoon's father? That we could be a real family?" I looked at this man who had destroyed me and then spent months rebuilding not just what he'd broken, but becoming someone entirely new. The old Doyen would never have asked. He would have assumed, demanded, taken. This Doyen sat before me vulnerable, waiting for my truth, prepared to accept rejection. "I don't know," I said honestly. "What you did in that cafe, the way you treated me, the money you sent to make me disappear, those things still hurt. They're scars that don't just vanish because you've changed." He nodded, pain flickering across his face, but he didn't interrupt. "But," I continued, "I also see who you've become. I see how you are with Jihoon, how you've protected us, how you've shown up every single day even when I was cold to you. I see that you're trying, really trying, to be better." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I'm not ready to say yes. But I'm also not saying no. Ask me again in a year. Keep being this person. Keep proving that this isn't just guilt or obligation. And maybe someday, we can be more than two people raising a child together." Doyen's eyes shone with something that looked like tears, though he didn't let them fall. "A year," he repeated. "I can do that. I can do that and more." He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and when I didn't, he took my hand in his. "Thank you for giving me hope. For giving me a chance to prove I'm worthy of you and Jihoon. That's more than I deserve." As I sat there with my hand in his, I realized something profound. The story that began with coffee staining marble floors and cruel words spoken in front of strangers had transformed into something I never expected, a story of redemption, of second chances, of a man who'd had everything and chose to give it all up for the family he'd almost destroyed. Whether we'd end up together romantically, I didn't know. But we were already a family in the ways that mattered, bound by love for our son, by respect slowly rebuilt, by trust earned through consistent action rather than empty promises. And for now, that was enough. Jihoon stirred in his crib, making the small sounds that meant he'd wake soon. Doyen stood immediately, moving to pick up our son with the practiced ease of a father who'd learned every signal, every need. As he lifted Jihoon into his arms, our baby's face breaking into a wide, gummy smile, I felt something in my chest loosen. Maybe forgiveness wasn't a single moment, but a series of small choices. Maybe love the second time around wasn't about grand gestures, but about consistency, presence, and the courage to be vulnerable. Maybe the man who'd broken me could also be the man who helped me become whole again, not by fixing me, but by giving me the space and safety to heal myself. Aisha, Doyen said softly, Jihoon babbling happily in his arms, whatever happens between us, I want you to know you saved my life. Not just by bringing Jihoon into the world, but by refusing to accept the person I was pretending to be. You demanded better, and you made me want to become it. I smiled, and this time it reached my eyes. We saved each other, I said. Now we just have to figure out what comes next. If this story moved you, if you felt every twist and turn, I need you to do 3 things. First, smash that subscribe button. We have so many more stories about people who faced impossible odds and came out stronger on the other side. Second, hit the notification bell so you never miss when we drop a new story that'll have you on the edge of your seat. And third, drop a comment right now telling me, would you have given Doyen a second chance, or would you have walked away forever? Also, let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing our community grow across the world. Your comments, your support, your stories keep this channel alive. Thank you for being here, for listening, for caring about Aisha's journey. I'll see you in the next one, and trust me, you won't want to miss it.